Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Advisors Webinars. Tonight we're gonna host my friend Dr. Sean Regan. He's going to speak about opportunities in the times of crisis.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay. Very happy to have you with us, Dr. Sean, tonight. First of all, again, I'd like to welcome everybody. This is our 7th week. We are happy, we are proud that we are succeeding together. In addition to the 7th, we had 2 other events. One of them is the Strategy Implementation Panel, and the other one yesterday was with the Gulf Downstream Association. So, we're starting tonight, Sean. We're gonna speak about opportunities in crisis situations. Okay, so seems like the right time to speak about the topic, huh? And you're speaking from where? Are you currently in the States or in Europe?
No, I'm live from Prague, Czech Republic. So
okay.
We'll be speaking from here today.
Okay, next week we're gonna go to the States, huh?
Yes.
Okay. So Dr. Sean and I, we have a long history together. We work together on many things. We work with PwC, work with Sonatrack and other ventures. He's a world-class A authority in terms of planning, scheduling, cost management, earned value management. He managed the total projects and programs that are worth over 60 billion, I believe, 60 billion US dollars.
Yes.
In several countries, okay? Spent some good time in the Middle East and Africa as well. So, by this introduction, I'd like to welcome you again. And if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself, I'm going to start the slides.
Great. Well, as Dr. Sadi said, we've worked together for quite a few years. I've been a member of
excuse me, Sean.
Excuse me.
Sure. Sean, excuse me. One very important thing, we always start by thanking our partners. And one of our partners is the Guild of Project Professionals. And I'm going to leave this to you to introduce to all of us who this group is and what it stands for. Also, I'd like to thank Strategy Implementation Institute. I'd like to thank several of the chapters whom we collaborate with all the time. I'd like to thank Budapest chapter, Saudi Arabia, Central Italy, Zimbabwe, Cote d'Ivoire, Uganda, Botswana, Mauritius, Moscow, and last but not least, our good friends from Tunisia. And having said that, sorry again for disrupting you, Sean. I'm not gonna do this again. The floor is all yours, and I'm gone. Welcome.
Well, thank you everybody for coming to listen to tonight's webinar about opportunities in complex and crisis situations. I'm Dr. Sean Regan. I've been in the industry for about 40 years. I've been with and supported the Education Board and international regions for AACE. I am with the ISO under the 21,500 series, which is sponsored by PMI and ANSI worldwide, and as well as our partners with the Guild of Project Controls, which is focusing on competency-based project controls around the world with their compendium and our testing items. And the Guild is taken interest and agreed to be one of the sponsors. The Guild is the more technical side of the Planning Planet, which is one of the largest and one of the first major blogs to support planners and schedulers, and gradually advanced into the other items. So in tonight's session, we're sort of going to take a little bit about what everybody's doing right now and discuss what's really happened in these complex times. And they've become very interesting in many ways for most of us. The topics I'll review is basically the challenge of these complex and crisis situations, which seem to be growing more and more every year. The next aspects we'll talk about it is reviewing really the risk and opportunities that come up with complex situations. And it's not taking opportunities as an advantage, but it's taking opportunities that basically benefit our industry and profession. And we do this through utilization of quantitative and qualitative analysis, working with sound programs that have been established by PMI and ISO, so that we have these situations and can support more and more people in the industry. The fourth area was we'll discuss a little bit about using strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis, or SWOT analysis, and how we utilize these forms of analysis to basically support projects and programs. And we will discuss this with a couple real life cases of complex situations in a couple different avenues, energy and oil and gas. And then lastly, we'll discuss what's the impact of not pursuing opportunities during this time frame, and how that economic impact can have a long-term impact on the profession and the overall industry. Now, let's discuss and get welcoming to, as I said, our 2020 challenges that we already have had in this time frame. We have everything from obviously COVID, which is having a major impact, but we're also seeing the impact of things like global warming and basically social disturbances, or what are called riots. And we also have to deal with these changing items, as well as things like piracy. And over the past 9 months, we've seen some great impacts that have basically put great amount of challenges on businesses' opportunities, and basically really changing the thinking. Such as, for example, everybody's heard, like yesterday, BP announced the layoff of about 10,000 people due to a combination of reasons. The revision of energy processes, they're trying to basically get into green energy, but also the impact of numerous things that have happened under global governance and governments. So we have had a great amount of challenges, and during these complex times, we need to basically go through. So let's sort of discuss some of the impacts that right now we're seeing that are impacting us in major ways. Obviously, as you said, we'll have a discussion about COVID-19 and the impact it's had on global transportation, on businesses, and the fact of changing things like more and more webinars and instruction, where universities and schools, not just businesses, are having to change the way they do business, utilizing webinars and tools such as Zoom or WebGem or Microsoft Teams. These changes have really had a major impact. One of the second things we'll discuss is basically here during the middle of that time, we had a series of oil wars that basically have caused a major impact on the industry. So, it's sort of like more straws in the camel's back, and it's breaking. We've recently seen more and more protests and riots that basically has gone from everything as right now worldwide, the Black Lives Matter, to Hong Kong and the Hong Kong situation, which overlapped from December and February, and how those have basically changed business and opportunities. We're also seeing basically for this year, again, a growing number of basically hurricane and typhoons, but the category of what they're doing and how they're having impacts to our friends in Bangladesh and India and Southeast Asia, who've had major typhoons, which have raised water levels and displaced hundreds of thousands of people. And lastly, how these impacts have sort of impacted what we're seeing in global warming, such as the Australian fires, which were catastrophic in the first quarter during the Australian summer, to the California fires, which impacted due to basically business and again high heat conditions, and the Siberian zombie fires, as they're calling them, or basically wildfires that have burned the equivalent of the size of the country of Greece and Siberia, which not only besides the fire have impacted oil and gas, mining, and as well as basically caused things like anthrax to appear. So all these situations have really posed and put a very intense avenue on across all the business lines that we deal with, computer IT, oil and gas, nuclear, solar. And so what we're going to do is sort of get into these complex situations and sort of look at some advantages that we can take and utilize for these. So let's talk about COVID-19 and basically its impact and things that we can do. It was a virus, highly transmittable, that basically started in November approximately and has carried through across the world with catastrophic results. More than 2.5 million people have been infected. The death rate is very high, and it has basically changed the transportation hub or how people can move back and forth. It has had an impact on trade, where we basically were, having issues now with the fact of trying to do like basic engineering design or procurement of oil and gas processing systems that have basically impacted projects and programs that we're preparing during this summer and fall to make transitions and improve their facilities. We have a shortage of engineering, a shortage of procurement, and a shortage of the ability to get through. The third aspect, of course, was travel. We all basically went through a form, in many cases, of basically quarantine. In Prague, I came back from Sonatrach in Algeria the end of February, and 4 days later was basically told I had to go into quarantine because the area I'd passed through and the area I'd been in was basically had a high amount of people. But that occurred about a week after I traveled. So that had an impact and basically started the change. One of the things I do as a professor at Anglo-American University, we had to basically convert from being live with 60% of our students from the United States and another 15-20% from Eastern Europe that basically had to go back. So it changed the prospect of education and graduation. We also needed to look at that, basically the development of changes that come within that and how we could basically continue on and support businesses. And of course, one of the big things right now is, of course, the fear of mutation, the attempts of how it potentially could mutate into different aspects. And everybody's sort of getting worried about the fact that in fall or, fall and winter, that we could see a resurgence due to the fact of it, the climate. So overall, the future of COVID-19 has basically requires a lot of basically review of the different opportunities that need to be done so that in a positive fashion to strengthen, to minimize unemployment, to increase business professions and allow people to go through. This has also done a radical change in our industry, such as in hospitals, where basically facilities have had to be built in weeks that take months. And these facilities and the future that they have and what they can do. And so modularization has become a key. Prefab metal steel buildings, modular units, concrete panel. And this required an upswing of a large amount of trade people in the construction and engineering thing to support. But also we saw an upsurge in Czech Republic. We are basically very heavy driven in the IT industry. So a lot of people had to make the adjustments to support because of all the call centers and support centers that are in the region. And this basically became a change of pattern for the IT industry. Now, the second aspect that we want to get into a little more detail before we discuss the opportunities is the oil war. We had basically government policies and conflicting about supply and demand, and this basically caused issues and caused the price to radically drop. Well, having worked in the oil and gas industry, that basically has a major impact on capital expenditures. And so we start seeing basically the ability to do outages and support, the ability to support leaks such as on pipelines. These have all been impacted. And again, there were scheduled things such as when we talk about the real case about a project in Africa that requires a very precise outage and the equipment delivery in a succinct way because we have a minimal time to do change the gas processing facility without impacting the electric grid. But if this modernization doesn't take place because of leaks and other processes in general age, it has an economic impact on CapEx and OpEx for this facility. Now, as we said, the EPC industry has taken a real beating because people have projects have been shelved, projects have been delayed, which basically just sort of start cycling. We start with engineering, we work through our procurement. This basically moves into the construction area. And we see these different aspects having impact, as well as things like gas pipelines such as Keystone or Nord Stream, which have protest or things from both sides, both the, sort of the Greenpeace, green environmental side, to governments who basically have a fear about bypassing and moving gas through. So all of these types of issues have had a very hard impact on the oil and gas industry, with the severe impact, of course, on their CapEx and OpEx of what they plan on doing in the next phase. Now, we can't basically avoid the fact that protests and riots are having a worldwide impact. This is basically impacting governments in multiple ways, from facilities to basically having to support, but also the destruction and things that have happened from these riots and protests, which are having a high economic impact. And basically, in the end, businesses need to be rebuilt. So that you will see an upswing in small and medium construction because somebody needs to go back. If a person had their businesses damaged, they need to replace the business. They have to replace the infrastructure that goes with it and the logistics of bringing through. And so as such, this is basically having an impact on our supply and demand as well, basically impacting the logistics of items coming through. So we've had major logistics routes such as the New Silk Road, which is basically from China to the Adriatic by boat, and shipping, by rail, crossing from China all the way through London, and then the transportation and trucking routes. So to not have an impact on those programs that have invested billions of dollars in the industry, they have to basically take a look. But at the same time, we have to look at the fact that there's unrest, there's isolation. And within this, you have different types of protests and environments. We have it from people's rights and beliefs that, universal, from everything from transgender to Black Lives Matter to climate change, where people are doing protests. And as such, governments and businesses are basically reevaluating and looking at the impact and how they can support and do things and in supporting these aspects. Now, the fourth area, as we sort of discussed in the hurricanes and typhoons, people understand it, but we've already had basically a tropical storm has hit the Gulf Coast. That has an impact basically on oil and gas production due to the shutdowns. But what we're seeing is that the storms are becoming more frequent and larger. And this has a major impact on our global logistics because of the shipping and the way ships crisscross between North and South America and Africa and Europe, and similarly in Pacific, where we have these lines that are of transportation which are being impacted. This has also led to a significant amount of basically increase in water levels. So people's beachfront properties, they're seeing massive amounts of erosion, which is requiring storm walls and different things to be done, as well as it's had an impact on platforms for oil and gas industry. But also we have new types of platforms that have to be looked at in the consideration. We have in Russia the new nuclear platforms, basically a first floating ship with nuclear. And so as such, we need to look at these with these increases and how they're basically going to drive through and look at that impact on shipment and production and how we can basically support them. And of course, one of the last areas we want to discuss is basically the global warming. Is of course we had the tragedy in Australia with the fires, the Siberian fires, which are basically already starting and expanding, the California wildfires, which had a major impact on the energy sector in California, as well as literally burning a town completely gone. And people need to come back and with doing that. So these fires are getting larger, and they're driven by heat, and areas that had more moisture, we're seeing a lack of moisture. While in other cases, we have areas that were a little bit more arid that are experiencing very high levels of rain, ice, and snow. So these impacts become greater and greater. And of course, we're starting to see this transition of opportunities in the Arctic Circle between transportation, the polar ice cap, the building of Arctic facilities. Many countries, Russia, Canada, China, Japan, etc., are building new icebreakers and ships because of the opening of things such as the Northwest Passage or the Arctic Passage. Areas that used to require, partial areas of frozen ice, frozen stuff, now have to be converted more into a seaborne route. And this has an impact on communities such as the Nets in the Arctic Circle of Russia, or similar, the Eskimo Nets area in Canada. This impact of basically how businesses are doing and how they can bring in. And this is requiring a significant amount of energy, engineering, and opportunity to go through. So before we go into, sort of lighten up, because it sort of sounds rather depressing to talk about all these complex areas, we have basically our first poll. And basically it's sort of to take a look at what do you think are the types of opportunities that come through. And it's sort of similar to the original Jumanji practice, of how every action has a reaction. So basically, looking at the things that have already started in 2020, what do you feel are the things that are going to really impact you and the profession, and what can be done under these opportunities for 2020 for the second half? So our first poll basically asks, based on what we've had for the first half of 2020, what are your expectations for 2020? Are we basically looking at the fact that we're going to see, we've lost the board, or we're going to the next level, or, game over, things are going to skip back to at least what was sort of normal a year ago? So give everybody a chance to respond to the poll. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Well, let's basically look where we are right now. So when I look at the percentages right now, we're basically seeing about 4% feel that we've sort of, we've lost the board. About 10% think it's, game over. We're going to get back to more normal. But 84% of you have generally expressed the fact that really, the second half of 2020 is going to, really pose this greatest risk to us, and we need to take a look at that. So let's basically start with risk and opportunities. In basically looking at risk and opportunities, one of the good guidelines that reference as well is basically the utilization, of course, like ISO 9001 based in 2015. And when we look at our risk and opportunities, we really see, that we're trying to focus on 4 general areas in this. We need to identify what are the continued risk of basically operating. Do we stay the status quo? Or are there opportunities in which we can perceive and work with this, and how that can basically go through? We then basically look at how we would plan the responses in supporting these opportunities in these complex situations. The third aspect is how we basically integrate this and look in our quality management systems, or utilizing quantitative and qualitative risk, and to measure the effectiveness. So one of the big aspects that really seen in risk and opportunities is training. In this time period, people in many areas were very used to the face-to-face, bring the trainer. I spent a significant amount of time in the previous years traveling. In fact, for the first time in 30 plus years, I haven't been on a plane in more than 3 months. And that basically sort of caused a pause as we started to reevaluate new techniques and opportunities that could be utilized. And so what we started seeing is traditional companies asked us for different avenues. So what we did is at Anglo American is we used Microsoft Teams and utilizing that by an interaction of live training to the students, as well as combining with online sessions. And then basically assignments and work assignments, we were able to reevaluate how we're basically going to go forward. So one of the opportunities that we've been asked at Anglo American to do is 2 of us have been asked to sort of mentor the rest of the professors, some of which, this was a struggle their first time. They've taught in some cases 20, 30 years, always to live students on their interaction in all fields, from history, sociology, politics, law school, project management, and quantitative risk and decision making. And we basically needed to come up and evaluate. So we took the opportunity of this to evaluate it. Now we have a risk right now. And one of the risks right now coming up is because of the European shutdown, people are still being limited on transportation. A good example for that, my wife was supposed to fly in 2 weeks to Russia to spend 2 weeks with her mother in Moscow to help her get ready, do the traditional move from downtown to the suburbs where it's a little bit cooler, a little bit more air, less construction work taking place. But Russia is now basically blocking flights, so she can't go back. Well, similarly, we have students, of which at our university, about 60% of our students come from expatriate status, i.e. US, South America, Asia, to come to university. But because the consulates have been shut down, and are just starting to open up, they're basically focusing on first immigration, second business, and third students. So we are looking at right now of a high risk that we're going to lose our students that are going to come in. Well, this is no different than many of our businesses. A lot of business people are taking MBAs. They're taking advanced degrees, or they were planning on training programs. And of course, we all know conferences such as AACE had to go virtual. The Project Controls Academy had to go virtual. Project Controls Expo has to go virtual. And we are seeing these impacts. So we're looking at the opportunity is to use now virtual conferencing through things like Microsoft Teams and other tools, and finding the right mixture of time with online learning with practical experience so people can participate in work. And so a great opportunity for companies right now is, while they were traditionally based on in-person, face-to-face, we now have the opportunity and have come up with and reviewed things such as people tend to lose focus when they're sitting on a program for a few hours and basically just sort of listening to the instructor. We found a time basic that was impacting them, and we sort of looked at, okay, here's an opportunity that we tend to find that we can't have people sit on an 8-hour course continually going through and sitting there and getting up and doing a break. It's not effective. So what we did is we found that by moving into short blocks, such as between an hour and a half to 2 hours, giving a break between 40 minutes and an hour, and then another 2 hour, people were basically responding better than when we tried to do long sessions and break them up. And so this gave people an opportunity. And by combining online opportunities with online learning, such as using PowerPoint with recording and using Microsoft Teams where we can record, or Zoom, to record the session so that people could go back. People are finding that it's actually an advantage now and an opportunity, and it's fairly cost effective for them. So this is allowing people that, rather than laying people off or putting people into a position of significantly reduced hours, we're able to basically increase the training and methodology of what people do. In some cases, to get unemployment, some states in the US and some countries like the Netherlands, they require to get unemployment, even with the COVID, that they're requiring their people to basically do training now online, and they have to submit that information, and that is their release of their support funds. So it is a good opportunity to go through and look at how we can basically balance that. So let's do our second poll. What's the highest risk you see in the industry right now? We basically have staffing, engineering, procurement, logistics, economics, but we also have and have seen a systematic failure of the system to generally support what is going on in the world right now. So switching over to the poll right now, we're seeing a fairly good mixture right now, still getting a few responses. It's trading. Right now, about 25% of the people feel staffing. Engineering's got a little bit of an issue. We're seeing procurement has about 12%. Logistics, about same 12%. But what we're seeing is now, where at the beginning, some of the people thought staffing, sort of the balance of the poll right now is 28% are feeling economics and 29% feel the systematic failure of the system is what's sort of driving the program. Well, and that's, a pretty good blend. In the end, about staffing, about 18, procurement, 12, and engineering. And that's a good blend because what do you have? We have people from multiple disciplines, and in many ways focusing the items that they're focusing on. And that becomes a key aspect. So when we look at staffing, we've sort of seen it. Unemployment's gone up. Companies have had to start reducing. Companies are now basically starting to do work at home. And of course, one of the issues that people discuss about staffing is, remote work was sort of nice to have for some people, but wasn't generally considered for much of the industry. But now we're basically seeing with better tools, people can basically do that. And as such, while staffing is being reduced on areas, it is creating opportunities in other areas for people to move around and switch. One of the key things that we've seen a good amount of people doing on staffing, such as at universities and engineering companies, of course, is trying to do and go back and do validations. And the staff support of these validations really supports the economics and the basically system failures. Engineering, of course, to some people is a critical aspect because of the one point. We have to engineer the product so that we can develop the procurement system to go through so that we can basically then do our construction. And as such, if we're not basically engineering work and programs, we're basically not going to have work in the future. So some companies have taken and are basically doing tools such as the PDRI, estimate validations, value for money audits on projects right now, and trying to see how they can apply those into a next phase. So in some cases, for both engineering procurement, which like a PDRI measures against, I've seen an increase of people asking for PDRIs, project definition rating index, which is developed by CII, which evaluates programs around the world in the billions of dollars by companies such as PwC, Bechtel, energy companies, Total, BP, et cetera. They're now basically starting to say, look, we were really pushing and fast tracking some of these projects. They're taking the opportunity to now sort of maybe spend a little bit more time working at some of these items and trying to basically maybe levelize and do a little bit more engineering and increase the design maturity. And that's a critical relationship with things such as AACE with their estimate classification, or the Guild, or PMI. But by increasing the review of products right now, in this lull, it's helping them increase staff and maybe come up with ways to better balance out their procurement, their logistics. Now, of course, the bottom two items, the big issue, economics. One of the biggest issues that really drives everybody, because economics is everything that is core to what we do, from the travel, from the hospitality industry to hospitality. I'm sorry, hospitals and stuff. We're starting to see an increase, and we need to see a change in these economic conditions so that people can have the correct CapEx and OpEx to support these projects. Simply speaking, cash flows down. Invoices and receivables are down because of things like the oil wars, where price of oil went down. This has had an impact because also currencies have gone and fallen with that. So basically, companies that basically have outstanding invoices are having a very difficult time because they need the revenue and cash flow from products such as oil and gas or energy from solar to basically pay for the prior projects. So how do we look at those economics and sort of take an opportunity on doing that with the economic system? And ways to do that is basically, sort of combining some of these industries and working through. One of the interesting aspects is, besides the fact of hospitals severely being working, one of the big things that we saw, of course, is public transportation. Public transportation was utilized a great amount of time by people to move around and support, because we still had stores, pharmacies, and things like that that needed to operate. One of the interesting aspects that we saw in Prague is the hospitality industry, which is heavily hit because Prague drives a lot of its money from that. What they did is a lot of the hotels and businesses utilized this time period of the shutdown and did renovation. So we saw a significant uptick of construction people. We also saw the ability of people to move around. So people who had other jobs sort of switched their economic thing for a bit. We had an increase of people doing Uber Eats, and other similar programs because people were limited, and we still needed to get, people need to eat and go through. But we saw a large increase of trades. So we saw people who did a lot of engineering actually moved in some cases to the trades to support the construction industry. And so a lot of new construction that was not planned was done. And that's an opportunity for these hotels, opportunities for some of these restaurants to do major changes, to rebrand themselves, increase their kitchen equipment and things like that. But they also had to do reconfiguration. So they use this opportunity time, knowing that social distance would come in, to basically create a new environment for their business so that they could move in very quickly. And of course, that last aspect we drive on is, was that systematic system of failure. And in oil war and like that, you can take on different aspects or opinions. For the financial institutions in the oil and gas, they feel it's a failure of governments basically not negotiating and not looking at it in the time period. But you look at the side of them, and they're basically saying this was a necessary part because basically we needed to try to stabilize. So in systematic failures of systems, there are opportunities of way in doing that. And of course, we're seeing basically in some cases with riots and different things, people have had to look at and say, look, they're not happy with what's going on in a system or a government or a process, and how we can make changes that are to the benefit to stop that system and maybe come back and look at things in a new approach. Now, the third thing is, let's look at 2020. What are the biggest opportunities we can develop? Staff development, modularization, localization, training, community integration, or increased performance. And so when we look at each one of these items, they sort of are, as I said, I've sort of brought them down from the other aspect. One of the things, The life of a consultant, is basically supporting our customers and looking at items that can come up and how we can basically take advantage of these items to basically have a positive impact. Not just look at opportunity on the bottom line and dollar cost, but look at the opportunities that we can basically do, because if all these businesses fail, it is going to continue a negative process. So we need to look at the opportunities that we can take. And right now, according to the poll, 23% of people are looking at their biggest opportunity is staff development. The utilization of modularization has about 8%. It has increased our localization. We're outsourcing and people were going and doing things. We have seen an upturn, as I said, like in Prague, and I've heard from numerous people in other areas that where they weren't shut down, they basically, and had people coming in, they saw an upturn in local engineering, local procurement. And so you started to see an increase in that. The training got about 16%. And then the last two took about the same, about 22, 21% each, and basically community integration. At this time period, one of the big opportunities for us is that, like in the college community, we have taken this opportunity to bring students in and have a students part of it. We've taken the opportunity to contact other universities and say, let's share the programs. We are doing community integration right now as we're all listening here. We are integrating the project management and support industries as a community on how we could do things and how we could support things better. And I think the last aspect, and this is a positive, this shows what people are thinking is positive, is that we can see an increase in performance. People are basically, it's very hard, of course. We've all had an economic impact or lack of items, but we are seeing people perform and do things at a higher level because they're feeling. One of the very strange aspects of that performance. I have two kids in college and one kid in high school right now. And I have right now, I saw a trend with two of them. That is a trend that I've had parents and friends and other colleges and even businesses talk about. The people who normally do not do well in the integration with people, they're very quiet. We are tending to see an upsurge in their performance. So my son, who is a C-level student, when he was in class with online learning and online program and integration, and then starting to do things more like Uber, he basically pulled straight A's for this semester utilizing Zoom at his college. But my son in one college and my daughter, who basically need structure, need the interaction with somebody, they're struggling. And so when I talked to and we had a call today between Australia, Siberia, Canada. And when we talked about and look at things, one of the issues is, again, some people are doing very well because they've been able to stay at work in their locations. And some people, it's very much a struggle because they're having to do more online and they're struggling for that lack of feedback. And it's made it a lot harder for them as in project management and engineering management and procurement to really do that networking that they need to be successful. So we look at the fact that the opportunities that can come up with this, are relatively balanced, but there has been an upsurge in performance for some, but there has been a reversal for others. And how do we find in these opportunities how to balance that for the next level? Now, when we do this and we take these risks and we identify things like we do, we need to look at things under the risk process, under the balance of quantitative and qualitative. One of the aspects that happens is we get a little too focused on one side or the other. So in relatively speaking, by looking at our quantitative side, if we can increase our deliverables, work on basically taking standard drawings and items that we've done and put them into models, which is being done all the time. We are seeing an upturn. I have some friends who work in the industry doing modeling. They've seen an increase because there's actually been more time for engineering. That while traditional drawings have been done, what they've now started doing is they've had time to put them into models, increasing the perspective for 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D. The second aspect that's really been helpful to some is the modularization. So to allow them to continue, they've been able to contact vendors who have been not as impacted as well by as much by this. And we've seen an increase in modularization. So while we basically traditionally were doing greenfield or stick build type projects, what they've now started doing is we've been able to work on modularization of units, which has basically provided a good safety venue. It provides social distancing. People are able to work on the units. And this has basically helped them to basically maintain the flow and get things out. I work in the steel industry, prefabricated steel and modular steel with my father. That's one of my reasons for going back to California. And in one of the things we've seen on is an uptick to the number of bids and products that have been asked for of supporting basically getting modular units and buildings up so that people can have a more safe social distance workplace than where they were traditionally working in the field. And this is helping them. Now, that other quantitative aspect is basically we are seeing a change in the productivity. And how can we take opportunity of that productivity and look at the balancing of those economics to basically do that? And so quantitative really focuses on those three things. Now, qualitative, one of the key things in looking at the opportunities, and I hope people don't take this as a negative, but in looking at the qualitative portion of it and looking at opportunities in critical crisis times, you have to remove feelings. You got to look at what are the opportunities, what are the risks, and how we can basically align with them. And so you need to look at it based on really mathematical and quality and performance so that you can make sound decision making. By doing this and helping them and looking at these metrics, we are coming up with new ways of productivity. One of the things, I do a lot of work in Russia and Eastern Europe and China, Asia, is they do a lot of work under normatives. One of the things and hopes is because things were done in a certain way and the norms have been factored a while, is possibly a chance of adjusting and looking at these new productivity methods and how they can basically help us come up with better quantifiable decision making. Now, the key thing we try to do when we do this, we need to look at what are our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And we do this through the SWOT analysis, which is a very useful tool that is supported by both the financial, the project management, procurement. It's basically looking at the metrics of how we can basically support these opportunities. And so one of the recommendations when you're looking at these opportunities right now is to basically develop a very simple SWOT analysis. And with that, you have a very good graphical representation that you can basically then provide quantitative and qualitative sessions in decision making and support to. And so let's basically get into a real project. So basically, I'm basically working with the team, and we basically have a West African gas production and energy area. And one of the requirements and needs is that they basically have been working and preparing for the modernization of the gas processing facility, which will help them have a better impact and basically support them. And so in doing this, they were going to use a combination of build and work in the field and modularization to basically go through. Because we have a national power grid, we have a limited time that we can do this outage and put items in. So we, at the original plan, you were going to have about 60, 70% in staged areas working, and then some package units. And the objective was they needed to minimize the impact on the power grid. So what happened to us? Well, the three things that have happened to that project right now is that, of course, we got COVID-19 and the social distancing, and it can be done. And we've got the impact of the oil and gas war, which has basically changed the metrics in which that they can basically work on right now. And what I mean on the metrics on that, one of the issues we're finding is we've gone to multiple companies, US, Egypt, UAE, Russia, that basically would be traditional engineering and package and equipment suppliers. And right now, because of the oil and gas war and COVID, they are basically in a downturn. And they can, one of my friends, he had 64 engineers who basically worked on package units in January. He right now has 4, and those 4 are dedicated to working the existing units. And basically, they receive from BP, Total, bid, companies all over. The stock works on capital construction, but they're getting requests now to do outages and upgrades on equipment. So what we look at is that for this project in our SWOT analysis, we have a strength is that we know we have good engineers and we have a good BED developed to work with it. We have a good management team that, in recognizing the issues, looked at the fact that how we could go through and support this outage and try to make sure that we can still try to do this project, at the time period needed. Now, of course, we have a weakness. And our weakness, of course, is oil and gas pricing and manufacturing right now. Because of that impact in pricing, we're seeing a spike on critical trades. And that spike on those critical trades, such as iron workers and piping, is causing an increase in the rate of what people get due. So, in the next one, I'll talk really detail about that. The opportunities, though, is by utilizing modular equipment in package units, we will minimize our social distance, and it will give us a controlled environment and basically help us bring that controlled environment into the items. But that last threat is that threat we have to worry about, social distancing. Can we do the work in the time period we're supposed to do? And can we do the shutdowns in accordance to meet that, because we have that critical integration of the items? So we're using our SWOT analysis right now to reevaluate how we're going to do this project right now. And it's a tough one. As I said, right now it's really hard because normally we should have been able to do an estimate. We can't get people who are willing to commit to hours and dollars doing it. And the ones who do, it is costing us on a premium. So we have to basically balance those out to do it. The second case study.
My dear, let's try to wrap it up in a couple of minutes because there are many interesting questions. Okay, and we already exceeded our time. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Simply speaking, on the solar one, because of the California wildfires last year, we have basically experienced a large series of rolling blackouts, and it caused an issue. And one of the areas that my father owns businesses in is residential care facilities. And what's happened is that a law was passed recently that basically what they want to do on residential or support of people who are sort of retired and they're in their own community home, they're not hospitalized or anything. They've been basically tasked to put in solar with solar batteries, which gives them islanding capability, i.e. they can be on the grid or can be off the grid. And because of COVID and the global warming, which impacted it, those were the driving aspects. So the strength that's happened is you've seen increased capability of energy by creating smaller sources that can basically do islanding. And we have basically experienced staff on doing it. We're also receiving experienced staff objects because Tesla, who produces batteries, is basically come up with a program to provide batteries at a program with basically gives them grants that allow them to do it. Of course, the weaknesses, we have to worry about social distancing and manufacturing, but it does give us an opportunity that it will minimize localized blackouts, as well as generate economic rewards, which by basically is long-term perspective of reducing our energy bills on these facilities. But we still have a threat, is that the blackouts can basically occur before I'm all done. And also failure to comply means buying generators, but also being not in compliance with regulatory. So the last poll basically highlighted, 4 things: staffing, the loss of opportunities, reputation, revenue, CapEx, and the impact on the community. And so let's just sort of get a quick hit on that of what people think. Boy, that was a loss of revenue, loss of CapEx, and impact on the community are really sort of the driving ones. And of course, basically, about 35 to 40% really are focused on that lost revenue and lost CapEx. So, we're seeing a very much tight mixture of, basically balance on that. So again, we're basically going to open now to Q&A and try to do through. So I'm going to ask my co-host to jump back on. But please, if you have any questions, my WhatsApp and email, I'll do the best I can to try to answer anything after the fact. And let's try to answer some Q&A right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. It's really interesting, okay? Especially the thorough explanations you offered and the various examples, okay? I like them a lot. I've seen lots of interesting questions. So first of all, again, we are extending the time. I apologize to our audience, but we're gonna go through since we have already almost 300 with us. One thing before, as usual, I'd like to introduce our next session. I'm gonna do this through a 1-minute video.
Hello everyone, my name is Jeff LaFrenz, President and CEO of BizWorks, coming to you from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I am really looking forward to participating with advisors to bring information on taking your model reviews to the next level. Like the evolution from blueprints to 3D models, advances in digital technologies are enabling a new step change that allow us to completely rethink the model review process. Moving from a shared view with a common experience to a shared environment with individualized experiences, the latest in model review technologies create the digital equivalent of a physical site visit. Driving deeper insights and understanding, the results are significantly reduced rework cost and time, while increasing the safety, efficiency, and maintainability of the resulting facility. This webinar will feature a live demonstration of Panoptica, an award-winning model review solution, and provide opportunities for you to try some of its capabilities yourselves. See you there.
So, Sean, let's start with questions. I
basically, one of the questions is basically, and I'm just going to start from the bottom and keep working my way up. Okay. So Mohammed basically asked, he'd like one more risk. And of course, Mohammed, that's perfectly correct. What we're trying to adjust is basically political influence in government changes. And you're right. This is causing us to lose opportunities right now. People are rethinking. People are very emotional. And that sort of ties in the other thing about feelings. Political influence is now changed around the world, and it's not going to go back. it's only going in one direction. And it's, it's changing how people think across the world. And that's a very good question. And again, things like, another Muhammad basically mentioned, there are some, uncontrolled things happens and things like earthquake. You're right. And my comment is, during an earthquake, I grew up in earthquake country. I grew up in California. I basically was doing construction during one of the biggest earthquakes to hit California in our time. And the opportunities that came from that is we re-engineered. We came up with better safety standards. We came up with new types of buildings. And basically we came up with, one of the critical areas was all around the world in some of the earthquake communities you have in California, granted only a few hundred years old, but in Turkey, in Iran. I had colleagues who basically, after the Iranian earthquake, they were supporting the rebuilding of historical structures that go back thousands of years. And that's a key aspect. You can use an uncontrolled situation to still create opportunities. And they found ways to raise money to basically strengthen some of the buildings and do protection. So that's an excellent question. In regards to the oil war, one of the questions is very good. Is this a good opportunity to focus on maintenance and revamping as CapEx has been basically stopped? And yes, Mohammed, that's why I was sort of addressing how we can basically use and focus on CapEx and OpEx. Simply speaking, you have some things that basically they were going to do an expansion, and now they're going to have to do a debottlenecking or a revamp or an outage so that they can keep basically a better production and delay this a couple of years and wait for the coming in. So those are great opportunities to look at. Let's see.
So you're looking at the questions?
Yeah. I said I'm started on the bottom and working all my way up. So I'm going to try to answer every question here.
Okay, good.
Nabil, I basically had a very good aspect. Do I feel that the economic differences between the states and these economic intelligence is going to increase the crisis? It very well could, Nabil. I mean, it's very much. But we're also seeing from my friends in the IT industry, they are basically saying they are moving on things that were 2 years down the road are now being done in the next month. And some things have already been done. So in that way, in the medical industry, there is definitely changes. The way we're doing clean rooms, the way equipment's coming up, changes by governments around the world, not just the US or that have basically said, hey, we're basically in a wartime footing and we need to increase production on masks and HEPA filters and things like that. So that is creating opportunities to basically go through. I'm just going to keep scrolling. Question. I think Osama asked a question for some of the risk I did. I explained them. It was a two-part in the slide. So I think I pretty much covered those suggestions. But if you have any other additional ones or something more succinct you'd like to ask me, Osama, please send me a note.
Yeah. Muhammad the Mash'i is asking about, isn't removing the feelings excluding a big part of the interpersonal skills? That's very critical.
I'm coming up on that one.
Yeah.
I was going to come up on that one because I had Abdularam right now. He's basically, again, with these delays of COVID and the logistics and financial, what's the best approach? Just canceling or save costs from ongoing projects and continue? I'm looking at the fact you need to look at both opportunities. What can we keep on going, but with a delay? But what can we do right now that maybe will extend the life of something? Maybe a small outage and some replacing of compressors or pressure stations may buy us some time to get into the leading part. But as I mentioned, it's very hard because I'm suffering very hard on my African project about trying to get somebody who will do procure equipment. They won't even bid it. And I mean, these are people who normally, would have it. And, that's construction are going to change. We see that in the fact that I think you're going to see more utilization of natural like riprap and barriers to increase on seawalls that are reinforced. One of the problems I know that colleagues suffer in England and in France that we're working on some projects is basically these storms are beating the coastline up. So they're basically having to look at a change of material. We're basically bringing concrete walls back with ventilated tubing so that, and then putting a barrier like riprap or barriers. One of the other things that I've heard being used in Southeast Asia is basically the sinking of freighters. Indonesia has been capturing illegal fishing vessels. And what they've been doing is sinking them in precise locations to create artificial reef barriers to basically protect. So they've taken a negative situation and turned it into an opportunity, as well as to protecting the fish. It creates a hospitality environment for scuba divers.
So one thing, can we come up with a conclusion? Of course, we're gonna go on the other questions, but I'm just trying to look at a holistic point of view. Can we come up with a conclusion that it is based on the mindset? If you have an open mindset, if you are positive,
right.
if you are looking utilizing innovation, not going into the pessimistic, negative thinking part that we are in Jumanji, the next level things will be too bad. Those who are positive, who think, who collaborate, will definitely find certain opportunities even in the worst situations. Isn't this the whole idea that you're trying to
Right. And that's the whole basis of this. It's again, people say, hey, you're trying to make an opportunity out of a riot or of COVID. Well, yeah, we have to take opportunities. And there's a couple questions, and I saw 3 or 4 people ask questions, taking the feelings out. Trust me, I'm 100% compassionate, everything going on. I have my son is basically, I have a daughter who works in oil and gas industry doing pipeline. I have a son who right now is basically looking for a job to be a police officer. And his expression was he wants to, rather than stay in school and improve his skill, because he has a psychology degree with his criminology, he wants to be a police officer on the street, being a positive influence and working with people. And that's how we do. You need to take the feelings away in some way. Yes, people are hurting. I'm not saying shut yourself off, but you need to look at opportunities without feelings, because it's very easy to get emotional. And the problem is an emotional decision, even in a positive situation, can actually turn a positive into a negative. So I'm not saying, be a box or a robot. What I'm saying is when looking at opportunities, you need to consider both sides. And sometimes that means taking your feelings out. That, yes, we have to, as we said, Ibrahim had a great comment. Projects have been canceled. Contracts are canceled. It's hard to be positive in this environment. What do? Well, we look at the opportunities. Yes, we have to maybe let go 10 people, but we get to keep 20 people. That's a positive. And for those 10 people, how can we do, or what can we do to help them come forward and balance and have a better position? There's another Muhammad, another great comment. Humankind is basically, I look at this, we are in the worst situation, to be honest, except for a global war. Since World War II, we are in the worst position we can be. The world's burning, ice flows, water's rising, riots because of people's beliefs, riots because of people's skin color, riots because of people's creed, or, and like that. This is a time when human beings, I take a positive side and say the opportunity for humans right now is to work together. The opportunity is to support people and to support other projects and to really take our truly global economy, our truly global businesses, and use that in an opportune time. Because like everybody sitting on this call right now who's still here and who was on here, I have a family. I have a greedy superficial side that says I need to pay and support my family. But I have a side like this that says we and the other, the 7 before and the other upcoming 7, we're here doing a webinar for you, for the profession, for people to say, let's get ideas out and let's work together. And that is a critical impact. Am I a little, it's going to be real interesting next week flying from Prague to Frankfurt to San Francisco to Las Vegas, because the plane's half empty. And, and I'm supposed, I've been told I have to wear a mask. I have, got to do this, got to do that. It's a very much a change for how people are doing it, and how hotel rooms, they're basically boxing every other room. So we need to look at this time and look at how the businesses can do. This is also a great time for companies to start being ingenious. How instead of doing a camp one way, how about doing modular? How about doing modular hospitals and doing things? Let's see. I'm just going to run through real quick. Let's see. Munir asked a couple good questions. So basically, corporations failing to identify threats in their SWOT. One of the problems is you have pessimistic people, the glass is half empty, and optimistic, the glass is half full. But one of the big things I always see when I'm doing validations or verifications is, as you said, they identify all the weaknesses and threats, but they don't identify strengths and opportunities. In another case, they basically don't identify threats. And they need to do that because it does have that direct impact on crisis management. So instead of doing risk management, you're doing crisis management.
There was
a great opportunity
by Imad.
Mm-hmm.
Imad is the chairman of the project management committee at the Gulf Downstream Association. Yesterday, we had a very interesting seminar together, and I think he's asking a couple of questions. Can you please address them?
Okay. Moving up is.
He's seeing a big opportunity these days to improve supply chain and procurement in specific, as it is one of the major elements behind success or failure of projects.
Yes, and that is that again right now. What's collapsing for people right now? The supply chain. This is a time period where companies were basically doing production and sort of sitting out. This is a chance for a supply chain or procurement company to relook. One of the projects I was working on was part of the Silk Road, was basically bringing in ships into the Adriatic and basically spurring them out to logistics centers that could do modularization and fabrication in one central area versus where they were doing it in 5 areas. So with consolidation, they were basically able to also take care of economics and social distancing. So
I believe,
water.
I believe the lessons learned from COVID-19 will have an impact on the way we design things, whether it is a supply chain complete system, or it is a building or a hospital, or how we design our economics. Okay, I don't believe we will have in the coming year the luxury we used to enjoy in the past years. Okay, it's gonna be a bit harder. Okay, but there are also always lots of opportunities.
Yeah. Well, most of us remember the 2008 financial crisis. It started in 2008, but by the time it carried itself around the world, it was 2011 before things started turning around. And what did we have? We had cranes all around the world sitting there. But what were the positives that happened on that? Is we saw a consolidation of some of the equipment and suppliers that sort of basically, instead of 3 companies going out of business, they combined themselves into one company and made the best of the 3 product lines into one line. And that's where things are going to come through. You are going to see, we're seeing it now in airlines, consolidation, the changing of airlines and aircraft and hospitality. I don't think I think it's going to take 3 or 4 years before we're back basically, jet setting around the world to have a holiday here and a holiday there. It's going to be a tough few years, but I think there's opportunities within that as an industry to work as project managers, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's IT. And we are seeing, I think, some leading changes. This call alone, how we're doing it, the quality of the call, the number of people.
Yeah.
And as I said, I'm using these on those 2 projects I gave you, I am doing right now. I'm flying to California in 2 weeks to get my solar construction license because my dad owns 4 facilities. The opportunity for us, we can let Tesla take the money, or we can learn, or we can build it ourselves, and we get the credit. That's a $400,000 flip for our company.
There's a question from Eid, I think Eid Wright. He says, as chairman of GCC, Energy Efficiency and Climate Change Team, I appreciate if you can talk about the impact of current worldwide COVID-19 curfew on climate change.
Yeah, well, let me put it thing. I've spent my life being accused by part of my family who are very liberal and very green that I'm a land rapist and I've destroyed the world building nuclear, oil, and gas. And I basically said I've also worked on some of the biggest solar fields and brought through items. You need everything. And then my family member drives away in a stinky Honda burning diesel. I think I thought it was very interesting just watching National Geographic, who I do some work with. The air is cleaner. The International Space Station has seen things that they haven't seen in years. I looked at the river. I spent, for my 4 months, I was in quarantine 4 months. But I would go out and walk my medical service dog, my Jack Russell, every day. And because she has to walk. And I used good weather, and I saw more of Prague in 3.5 months than I saw in 3.5 years. But I would walk by, I live right next to the river, and I'd walk by the river. And I can tell you that pictures I've taken, the river ground went from brown and murky with oily sheen from all the boats on it. There's no oil sheen. There's almost no litter in the river. And the water is running clear thing, and we're seeing fishes. My friends in Italy, Danilo and Arnaldo, shared pictures. Dolphins moving up the Venice canals. So
Danilo,
I think,
yeah.
Yeah.
Danilo,
Yeah. So I think what we're seeing.
Abdullah Akbinar always attends from Turkey. I don't know if he's with us tonight. Yeah.
And Abdullah in Istanbul, and I know that people of my friends in Turkey have said the Bosphorus is running cleaner. The air is cleaner. Family in smog-heavy areas in California are seeing Catalina. My aunt lives in Southern California, and because of smog, when I was a kid, you could see Catalina Mile, 26 miles away, clear, and you could see another island down the coast. You only saw them on windy days when the smog was pushing. You didn't see it. Well, now you can see the islands. You can go from the mountains of California and drive down to an area. And I know friends in China say in Beijing, the air is clear. So I think, yes, I think by doing, and I think what it's doing is it's going to change people's perspective, and the opportunity in renewables and like that is going to be an opportunity in the energy section. BP is trying to put a spin on laying off 10,000 people by saying it's going to increase its green footprint. Some people believe it. Oil and gas people, we all know.
Okay, so I believe this concludes our discussion for tonight, Sean. I'd like to thank you very much. I really enjoyed. Okay, one interesting thing is that each speaker who is generously joining us from our friends and partners and allies is bringing great value from a different perspective. And I'm extremely happy about this, okay? Trying to provide a mosaic of professional points of views, each would enrich us one way or the other. So I wish you a safe trip. Actually, it's going to be an adventure trip from Prague from Prague to California, okay? And maybe you tell us about it later on, okay, after you've settled. Thank you very much for being with us.
Well,
I would like to thank, our audience. Yes.
I was going to say it also, right now there's some great upcoming professional things, like I said, from AACE trying their conference online to Project Control Academy to PC Expo and stuff, where the cost has been severely dropped. And it really cuts the cost without transportation. And I would encourage everybody, this is a time period to talk to management people to get a chance to see things and do. Like on a couple of them, I convinced, one group that we're working with, and you and I are working with, we're putting materials up live for 3 months. Not just you listen to it, go to a conference, throw the books in the trash because it's too heavy to carry on the plane. We're going to give them materials for 3 months, and we're encouraging people to share it. Don't abuse it, but to share it with the professionals and your colleagues. That's an investment tool. We're investing in a profession. The day I don't want to teach and don't do this anymore with Dr. Saadi is the day I'm going to go to a non-extraditing country, open up a bar and a dive shop, and disappear off the grid. But while people still want to listen and learn, we're going to listen and learn.
Yeah, exactly. So, Sean, thank you very much. Have a very nice evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Final reminder, as usual, Mustafa, thank you, Mustafa, very much for being with us, supporting us, managing everything together, along with the other team, of course. And please don't forget to fill in the forms for the videos or for having the presentation. For last night's presentation and certificates, they are under process because they will undergo a GDA review before we release them. This is why they have not been released so far. Next week, also a friend of mine, and we work together in Saudi from Canada, Jeff LaFrance, he's going to talk, and even he will provide a live demo on how multiple teams in various locations can utilize this advanced technology for augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and whatnot. The last thing, our friend Antonio Nieto Rodriguez, he's extending, I believe, their offer for the strategy implementation professional for the end of June. So if somebody is interested in that, you should take the opportunity for utilizing the 50%. I believe Mustafa can share with you the link and the documents for those who do not know it. Having said all these, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us so late again. Okay, every Wednesday, there are no movies, Sean. There's a advisors webinars surviving the pandemic challenges. Yes.
There's one more thing. Since Mr. Rodriguez offered, if anybody's interested, the Guild certification, we are basically offering the Guild certification and membership for signing up and doing things at a substantial reduction to do. So if anybody is interested in a cross certification, competency based, please contact myself and I'll put you in team connection with the Guild people. But this is an opportunity to look at other types of certifications. So
Mustafa will route all the inquiries to you. So anybody who's interested, they are all in connection almost on daily basis with Mustafa. So he will make sure they benefit from this generous opportunity as well. Sean, thank you and good night. Okay?
Peace be with you.
Bye-bye. Okay, bye-bye. Hello, my name is Dr. Saadi Adra. I'm offering a webinar, Breaking Organizational Silos During the Times of Social Distancing. Join me soon.
This is Dr. Ibrahim Shira speaking to you from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We'll be focusing on public-private partnership contracts and privatization contracts. See you.
Hi, my name is Antonio Nieto Rodriguez. I was the chairman of the Project Management Institute in 2016. Today I'm going to talk to you about why project management needs to reinvent itself, and project managers too. So I look forward to see you in my webinar.
Hi, this is Al Zaytoun from Washington, D.C., USA. I look forward to interacting with you on the Advisors webinar titled Balancing People, Process and Governance for Operational Sustainability. See you then. So long.
Hi there, I'm Radia Benaria from Algeria. I'll be talking to you about emotional intelligence, leadership, and transformational change. I hope you're well. Stay safe.
This is Mustafa Fuzoğlu from Turkey. I'm offering you a webinar with advisors on digital project management.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sean Reagan from California and Prague, and I will be presenting a webinar with advisors on opportunities in crisis and complex situations, so please join me.